be surprised if we walked into manufacturing facilities, into construction job sites, in any kind of physical space, and seen how much of it is done by machine learning. And it's a very, very small percentage. If you combine disparate pieces of data that you don't think actually have any commonality to them, it would actually make it better. And one of the best ablation studies was poetry and coding. They did an ablation study that showed that because they added poetry and coding into the same model, it actually performed better at poetry and coding. If the AI is this strong, it can do all of these things and it has access to your data across all these paradigms. How important is it then? Is it still okay as the relationship we have today with Google or with large companies and like Meta and so forth? Or is it not okay? And
Welcome to Artificial Insights, where we talk to leaders and thinkers in AI about how to do AI right. I'm your host, Daniel Maneri, and this is Season 4. Here, we sit down every other Friday with people who build things with and write things about AI and talk to them about what they do and why they do it. Today, I'm joined by Adeel Zaman. Adeel entered the University of Waterloo at just 16, earned national recognition in math and programming, and later co-founded DOZR, scaling it across Canada and raising over $40 million to help revolutionize the construction industry. He's now building a new company out of the HF0 residency, focused on what he calls Embodied AGI. Adeel, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
yeah, so my name is Adeel Zaman. My background, I did research in deep learning, and then I actually jumped into the startup world and built a few companies. My last company, we built the largest online marketplace. So we brought e-commerce to the construction industry, and we grew that to 43 million annually. And I actually solved the cold start problem of that marketplace through deep learning. So I was always kind of truly intrigued by using deep learning in solving problems in the real world. And that's what kind of, led me from like research to, to startups. And then most recently, I've started a company recently, where really what I got really excited about was how can we take the leading AI models and apply them to the physical world? I feel like there's a lot of awesome work being done in knowledge, in the knowledge workspace, and that's great. But we'd be in a dystopian future if we haven't made progress in using AI to accelerate tasks in the physical world, right? Because a lot of these tasks need to be done. Like we need to build a lot of things from hospitals to nuclear plants, energy infrastructure and transportation. And it just at the moment manufacturing, and at the moment we haven't made as much progress. We'd be surprised if we walked into manufacturing facilities, into construction job sites, in any kind of physical space, and seen how much of it is done by machine learning. And it's a very, very small percentage. And I think arguably it's probably one of the biggest also unlocks we can do to improve our standard of living as a society, right? To be able to do these tasks at a lower cost and more efficiently. So, and then what got me, I saw this paper, it's called the RT2 paper. It was by DeepMind. And it was really interesting where it showed that you could take a multimodal foundation model like a VLM. Let's say we had access to Claude or GPT, and you could give it robot action data on top, and it would perform better out of the box than other models because it was leveraging the internet knowledge. And that concept really kind of stuck in my head of, hey, could we utilize the same concept? Because there are some learnings that we get, when we're reading online that help us in how to do physical world tasks. Sure. So that's what I'm kind of up to. And, I kind of call it like trying to build embodied AGI because I think like in the future, I really believe in the foundation model approach where there's going to be a one AI model that's going to be able to do a lot of different physical tasks or can learn a new task. And I think that's a big paradigm shift. Actually, I'll just touch on that a little bit. Please. I kind of saw it happen in the knowledge workspace. So in the early days, I used to work on train LSTMs or RNNs, right? For let's say a task that would do sentiment analysis on comments or would look at legal work. And that was the state of the art in deep learning at that time. Whatever vertical you're looking at, let's say you're looking at in computer vision, you would take data from that vertical and you would train models, deep learning models on that. But then really the foundation model approach from GPT onwards showed us that, okay, if you combine disparate pieces of data that you don't think actually have any commonality to them, it would actually make it better. And one of the best ablation studies was poetry and coding. They did an ablation study that showed that because they added poetry and coding into the same model, it actually performed better at poetry and coding. And, I think theoretically, this makes a lot of sense. Like at first, it's, we kind of missed it as an AI research community for many years because we could have done this, Transformers came in 2017, probably 2018, 2019, we could have mixed data, but we didn't. I think people were already still using them to just tackle them for one specific verticals. But I think it makes sense. I think if you look at humans, we learn, let's say we learn one task, there's some small abstractions from that task that we use in the next one. So definitely across poetry and coding, but I'll go in the physical world. If we learn how to do the dishes, there's some abstractions about physics and so forth that we use when we then go and learn, let's say, how to operate a tractor. So I think there's kind of transfer learning we're doing inside our brains, and that's what really the foundation model approach is unlocked. So I'm trying to bring that to the physical world. I think that if you can build out a foundation model for the physical world in the right way, and we can touch on, I think there are lots of challenges. One is how do you get the data in the right way, and the other one is how do you create a great paradigm of learning? Today, the models they get trained by the big labs, and then they get released, but there isn't this paradigm of continuous learning that humans definitely have. But I think if we can solve some of those, I do truly believe we're on a good path to coming up with a model like that arguably could be embodied AGI, where it can have general intelligence around the physical world and being able to operate in it.
I think when people think of AGI, they think of something like iRobot, and it's this embodied thing that has ability to work in the world. And what does that look like with what you're doing?
Yeah. So with what I'm doing, I'm starting off with construction equipment, and the first kind of few embodiments that we're launching is excavator and then skid steer, and these are very like if you any type of project that needs to be done, you kind of need to start with the ground. And on the ground, there is excavators are one of the most useful components. They're about 200 billion globally market cap outside of all construction equipment, which is in the trillions. And and it's a very kind of useful embodiment that you need to use in a lot of different tasks. So I'm kind of starting with that, and then in skid steer, and then we're moving to different embodiments like humanoids later. And one of my thesis is that I've been looking a lot at evolution, and in evolution, the way our intelligence was grown, I kind of think about this. Imagine it was put into a human first with all these like different limbs, right? Would it have been able to thrive and do these tasks? And I don't know if it would have. And I think it was really able to kind of evolve in being able to learn a easier embodiment and then kind of grow from there. And so, kind of bring this to digital intelligence. What the approach that we're taking is first on the excavator, we try to just help it learn how to use an excavator. And the base model is very similar to the leading open source and closed source foundation models. But the main difference is how it is kind of programmed to learn from from its interactions, and how it's
Hmm.
programmed to kind of learn different tasks. So I'll touch on both of them. How it's programmed to learn different tasks. I think there's a really interesting concept of like things we do subconsciously as humans and things we do consciously. So
Yeah.
if you pick up a mug, right, like you're making the decision to pick up a mug and you're kind of subconsciously grasping it, where you're not actually spitting out actuator movements. Like your brain is not consciously saying what's the coordinates that your finger needs to move to grasp this mug. And I think that paradigm, there has been some good research that's tackled it, but that's something that I've been working deeply on is how do you how can a foundation model do that in real time? So a good example is to go back to that reasoning conversation we're having. Because that's the other kind of insight that we've added is we let the foundation model reason real time. So when the excavator is excavating on there's a touchscreen inside it. You can actually it just talks to you. It's like, hey, I'm deciding to go left because I think I need to pick this rock up first and move it here before I can go do this next step. And you can talk
Wait,
back.
so you're inside this giant machine and it's being controlled by an AI with a touchscreen in front of you, and it's telling you like, I'm gonna move this giant arm and bucket to pick up this thing over here and do stuff with it.
Exactly, exactly. And
Wow.
I really believe that this may be the future paradigm of robotics as opposed to the one that I've seen. That's what kind of inspired me. I guess I should touch on this. Like we built a great company that, at DOZR that grew, and it wasn't an easy decision to go and say, okay, I'm gonna get back to the ground level of starting a new company. It is, one of the hardest things I've ever done. And there's not much sleep over the last year. But I truly believe that there's something big to be done in robotics that hasn't been looked at. So I just don't believe in this concept that's some robot's going to get trained to a great accuracy and get sold to us, and then it just like works out of the box. That's actually not how
Mm.
employees work. Like if you hire an excavator operator, you talk to them all the time and you work with them to solve specific projects, but also to improve their learning on how to solve like next projects that you may get in the future. So one of my kind of views is that our product is fully voice AI first, right? And you can talk to it all the time. You can talk to it when it's not working. You can be like, hey, next time you should try this and this, and also when it is working. And when it is working, you just kind of talk to you, say, hey, actually, I don't think you should move this rock first. You should go there first, and it'll stop and it'll go, okay, I should have probably done this maneuver first. And through these interactions, I think there's two things. One is we can do RL to keep improving its learning, and that's something I'm really excited about with kind of RL from language guided rewards. So, recently the
Yeah.
RL has done really well in getting us kind of to the next frontier of improving our multimodal models. But one of the, like, I guess, one of the bear cases for it is it only works for coding and math because it's verifiable rewards. And the
Yes.
approach, the way I think we can kind of jump over this is what if, because if we look at back to human learning, humans don't have verifiable rewards, even for math. That's the kind of interesting, or coding, the way we learned how to code is we coded. Well, I mean, obviously there's some verifiable, but in the big early goings, you kind of code and you give it to your teacher or your dad or something. They're like, hey, it's, this is wrong or this is right. And so I think that paradigm can be done. There's some kind of good research recently on it, and we're internally really working on this, which is it's just RL with the rewards being from in this case, the owner, right? Giving you feedback back, or whoever the robot's working with. Yeah. And then the other aspect I'm really excited about is this kind of reasoning, like having a chain of thought reasoning alongside your robot working. I actually even wonder if later cars should do this. Currently the Tesla FSD and Waymo have not taken this approach, but I could see a future where you're like, hey, actually, Waymo, can you do a quick sharp left turn here? I actually changed my mind. I need to go here, just through voice. And even itself, because, I live in San Francisco. I've been take kind of Waymo all the time. There's many times where there is no objective right answer. Like the Waymo is behind, this bus, something's going on there. And this concept of being able to work with the humans around you to make decisions for robots would be where it's like, hey, actually, you know what? I think you should go around this, or maybe you should not go around this bus, and I think with cars, it's a little bit linear, right? You go from point A to point B, but definitely with robots, I think this concept, it makes a lot of sense. So we're doing some great research on this, and then kind of launching it first with the excavator, and then soon with Skits here, where you're just talking to it and you are working with it, and it is talking out loud about why it's making the decisions it's making. And it's, from a technical perspective, it's one stream of tokens. It's like, it's just spitting out the language tokens and the action tokens at the same time.
Wow, that's really cool. And just so I understand your reinforcement learning point, what you're saying is you can then give it feedback and say, oh, maybe you shouldn't have taken this left turn. Maybe you shouldn't have picked up that rock. And you're able to use that feedback and say, I had this chain of reasoning. You told me this wasn't the right thing to do. Now somehow I'm going to match those two together and change the model and do something else differently next time. What does that look like?
Exactly. Yeah. So that is, so there's two parts to this. One of them is we are doing reinforcement learning based off every owner, because the owners may want to teach their robots in a different way, right? And some may actually want to teach their robots more to make them to work harder on teaching them. It's kind of same as like parents or teachers. Some teachers work harder on teaching their class, and so basically the owners will kind of really drive that reinforcement learning, how much they want to do, how much they want to go and say, okay, we're going to do a new task. You're doing this wrong. You're doing this right. And in the back end, it's basically taking that language, converting it into a reward model, and then training. And the other reason I'm really excited about this, I think we have to figure out how to go to this paradigm in not just embodied AGI, but also a kind of AGI and the leading models, because if I look at what makes, humans have this kind of incredible advantage right now over our best digital intelligence models, which is that there's so many thousands of hours spent on teaching every human, from the parents to the family members to teachers and so forth. And we do need to somehow create that for robots, I think. At some point, let's just take, we're maybe talking about robots, but I think the same concept exists for digital AI agents, right? So soon there'll be an AI agent that a company can take, and they can say, okay, I want to these, you can go do these back office tasks, right? But if you hire a back office employee, you do work with them and you do teach them and you do reinforcement learning with them. You say this task was good or not good. So at some point, we have to kind of be able to get to this paradigm where, the people that work with the AI models that they have. Now, the reason we haven't gone here is the model's too big. So it's just too costly to retrain it for every user. And so I would argue that's probably the biggest thing that's holding this back. And the second one is, it creates some security concerns, because some owner could really teach their model to do something bad, or not, or even capability concerns. So someone could be giving really bad reinforcement rewards back. So I'll just touch on how we're solving some of those. So one, on the capability and security concerns, it's really on, I'm kind of, the goal with my new company is to provide robots that it's individual AI, like that the owner truly owns. So it's theirs. So they can teach it in any way. If they invest more time in teaching better, it's not like FSD, the weights are shared, right? Everybody teaches how to drive.
Yeah.
And the weights are shared, and then you get the next FSD version where you get a better driver. And that's okay.
That's the thesis I've heard before. And I think what you're saying is unique in what I've heard, where you're actually saying people should have individual instances of this AI that is customized, that is taught, rather than just shared among everybody.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's important on multiple levels. I think one of them is, I've been thinking a lot about like privacy, and where, is it that AI is a different paradigm from software? Obviously, we've lost privacy in software, for example. Well, there's always convenience and privacy trade-off, right? The convenience is, I'll take Google example. I'm fully on Google Maps. and, Gmail and so forth. So they have a lot of data, but I get convenience through that software. The question I think in a lot of people's mind is that privacy convenience trade-off okay with AI? So let's just say in 5 years from now, we live in a world where, we have a home AI, which is connected to the same as our phone app AI, right? And let's assume that it can control all of our robots. So imagine you're on like a kind of, a big house and you have a tractor in the back and you have a car and you can just say, hey, car, go drive my kids to school, right? And then, hey, go the tractor, kind of go do this, right? And you're just sitting at home, like talking to your AI at home. And then you also kind of say, hey, start my coffee machine, right? And then send these 4 emails off and do this report and send this to my colleague, right? And it just does all of it. And it's one AI. Now let's imagine that world, because I truly believe we can get there in a few years. And let's say when we're there, the question becomes, well, how, if the AI is this strong, it can do all of these things and has access to your data across all these paradigms. How important is it then? Is it still okay as the relationship we have today with Google or with large companies and like Meta and so forth? Or is it not okay? And I don't know. I think that has to be the public discourse over the next few years. But one thing I do know is it definitely does benefit if you can deliver good individually owned AI, right? And secondly, I think it does create a great paradigm of incentive to teach. And that's the second part that we're focused on with our kind of AI deployment, which is, okay, if you own it and you teach it, then when it goes out and does tasks, not only for yourself. So for example, with Grizzly AI, it will, once you teach it, you can actually put it up on a marketplace where others can use it for their projects. And you can kind of make money off the hard work of you teaching yours, but it's yours. Like you can lend it to someone, but you don't lose it. And it's not this shared weights concept. And so I do think that paradigm is important, regardless of how we end up, maybe there'll be a bunch of kind of communal AIs that everybody uses, and there'll be some individual AIs that people really, it's like theirs, they want to improve it, they want to teach it. And then from a privacy perspective, I think it's very valuable because just kind of put this in perspective, you have 4 Grizzly robots, one is excavator, one's a skid steer, one's your humanoid. You truly want to really be the one doing reinforcement learning on it. You want to be defining the rewards for, because of it has access, like it's near your kids, it's near your kind of property. Like you probably want to drive that model more. So I do believe in this paradigm of individual AI. Now there are some technical challenges, I will say, like the biggest one being cost. Like how do you, because like I think bigger models perform better. I think the bitter lesson is something we've all kind of learned, and I think it's going to keep going. Even today the models have much less if we compared to the synapses in a human brain. So I think we need to keep getting even bigger. Yeah. So then there's really a cost challenge. Now we have a solution that we're working on for that, which is you can kind of swap out the base and only the user only owns their kind of reward model and reinforcement learning that gets redone. And I think that, it's kind of similar to the paradigm of, because every few years there's going to be a bigger model that's trained in the open source realm. Like right now we just had DeepSeek 0528 come out. There's, the new Quen 3. There's going to be a Quen 4 and Quen 5. And arguably it's going to be better than Quen 3, right? So now let's say you have really done a lot of reinforcement learning over Quen 3 and you got this great robot at home that does your dishes and everything, right? When Quen 5 comes out, based off your training, Quen 5 will probably do better. So we have to kind of create this paradigm of being able to update.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually, because you get all sorts of technical debt problems where you're stuck with something, like even software that was released 2 years ago. How do you upgrade? And it sounds like what you're saying is you're creating that environment where the base model does learn, and then you can take that environment and stick in a new base model, and you'll still get something personal out of it.
Exactly. But I should mention that a lot of this is very experimental right now because, it is not like there are some things from a technical perspective that have to be hashed out. One of them, is it worth it to take every user's interactions and retrain a new large model, right? And how do you divide up when you do and when you don't? But I think zooming out, I'll just kind of share like my hope and kind of thesis here is that hopefully we do solve this concept. Because I think if we don't solve it, we're kind of stuck in this realm of, like right now in the robotics world and the non-robotics world are in unison in this concept where Tesla Optimus, let's say, tries to make Tesla Optimus as good as it can, and then they'll sell it to you. Where an OpenAI will, make GPT-5 as good as it can from pre-training and post-training, and then they'll give it to you. And once they give it to you, you can't really improve it to your liking. And this is so different. If we really want to get to that world where we have a white collar or kind of a physical world worker, right, available to us via AI, that's just, that's not the paradigm. Like when you hire somebody, you can work with them to improve their intelligence, to improve the way they work. And so obviously there's technical challenges, but I do hope we can solve this. And that's what, I'm kind of working hard towards it, but I think there's something over the next couple of years that have to unlock to be able to solve it. I'll just touch on one aspect, which is, as the models get better, they get smarter. We can actually use the same models to determine what parts of the reinforcement learning that was done on the previous model should be utilized and should not be utilized. And could you distill it and could you decrease the cost of updating, right? And I think that would be, so I do think there could be ways to figure that out. And now you're making the cost manageable, right? To be able to swap the base model.
That's cool. I'm excited to see how that research goes. And to me, it feels like there might be a difference between knowledge work and physical work in this space where, maybe an average office company that's small business doesn't have the resources to try and train this new AI to do their specific ways. And probably their documents are not that different than everybody else's. Like, how did you arrive at that decision that the physical world is different if you think it is different?
No, 100%. Actually, I would say in both the physical world and knowledge work, it would be that probably 90% approximately, right, of customers do not have the incentive or motivational dynamics to do this. A, they may not need it. B, they just don't have the time, right? Like they want an AI. Let's just take knowledge work. They want an AI agent that can go do a certain task, right? They're going to try the different like Manus and GenSpark and the different AI agents that are coming out, right? And they're going to look for one that does it. But I think in both the worlds, there's probably this 10% that have the incentives for different reasons, right? One could be monetization. One could be just pure kind of exploration and interest of this thing of being able to train something and see how well it does. And third, probably the biggest bucket is because you actually need to, because you're trying to differentiate yourself from your market, whatever market you're in, right? Like you're trying to, a good example could be like in the physical world, we have a lot of labor shortage. So right now, one of the challenges is that just to grow, a lot of companies, I talk to a lot of contractors, they don't grow because they worry that it's just going to be so hard to increase my labor force, right? And people are going to leave, and it's that I might as well just stay at the stage that I'm at today, right? Instead of kind of like, for example, let's say someone's doing 10 million top line, they probably know how to do 20 million top line and take on more projects. One of the great things that's happening is we're reindustrializing. I think we do need to reindustrialize in America, and but to that, there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of demand for energy, for infrastructure that needs to be built, but the labor just isn't there right now. And so then you could see a future where the way that they can kind of grow is by having more robots. But now when you're there, now you imagine there's all kinds of projects. It's not like unified type of problems you solve. There's different problems. Like you may be on a slope trying to do something, right? Or like an uphill or on an edge of a bridge trying to fix something while making sure the excavator, let's say, doesn't fall off the bridge, right? And the thing is, in all those scenarios, I really think this paradigm is going to be tested that the current leading model companies are doing, which is it that you can just get some AGI that knows all of these different tasks? And is it not that some customer would want to differentiate within their own market? Because today, if we move from AI and we think about like how humans are competing in any subset of the economy, well, what's happening is, you're right, about 80% of companies are just doing the everyday SOP processes, right? Like there's nothing, but there are definitely companies in every submarket that are like, okay, we've learned this new task and we do this better. And that's why we get the next contract or the next revenue. So I actually think the dynamic exists across physical world and knowledge task. I'll give a knowledge example because I'm a huge, I'm kind of building this new company in a very AI first manner. I'm a big believer of that. What I mean by that is like, I'm kind of thinking for first principles is how efficient could you really be in today we're using AI. So, and I think like deeply efficient. A good example is basically we go across the stack of supply chain, manufacturing, hardware, software, deep learning, and GTM, of course. And that whole stack currently I'm kind of doing as one person. And you can kind of do that. But I'm talking to Al, do I have, DOZR, we grew to 120 employees, right? And I'm thinking about this, well, do I have 0 employees or do I have 120 employees? I'm not exactly sure, but I do have some employees because I'm talking to Claude and GPT all day long. Right, I'm talking on the computer when I'm driving. So and there's a lot of valuable kind of, it can help you move faster. It can help you kind of do things. Now, the one interesting example is a lot of times I'll do deep research reports. And if you look at those deep research reports, and I used to do deep research reports with, in other companies where I'd have a team member go do a report. And I don't know if it's a capability issue, right? There's always going to be, if you're trying to truly excel at what you're doing, you're going to work with your team member to do that report in a different way, and do like, hey, when you were kind of researching on this, because a good example for us is we do research for every new hardware component we may need to add to the machines. And it's not as easy as, I need, this sensor, right? It's a research problem figuring out what is the best optimal sensor given all the different parameters. And, is there a future where like GPT-7 is just good enough to solve that for every hardware company? I don't know. I think yes, for lots, but every hardware company is problem solving and innovating in their own way. So they need a way to, kind of get the model they work with to perform in the way they do. So I do think this paradigm needs to be solved in some ways. And I'll touch on one thing here right now. What's some people have kind of thought about in this kind of sphere that we're talking about is memory. And they're like, okay, well, what if there's like what if you own your own memory and you could kind of apply it to any model and you have some sort of a database or so forth. And I'm currently not I'm not sure if that will work because, and I'll show you why. My current inclination is that you need to bake this learning into the weights, or at least that's how humans work. We
Yeah.
don't, the reason we have to do this great, like if you learned something like a week ago and you kind of know it now, it's not because you have some database, where you're like, oh, this is what, let's say you had a team member that says, hey, actually do this way, do this report this way. It's not like you have some database that's baked into the weights. I think it's obvious. Like we don't, obviously we don't know as much about the human brain, but I think there's some things that we can predict, which is that gets baked in. So now to go back to our models, I feel like it will perform better if it gets baked in. So that being able to figure out in that way would be beneficial. So I do think and to solve the cost problem, one thing that we're doing and I think should be done is a small model for memory and personalization and keeping the large model as is.
So what you're saying is like the common way to do memory is essentially distilling a list of facts, and then I go and look at that list of facts and I put it back in the LLM. You might have an approach where you have a small model that you're actually building as the way that learns just the way any other model learns from the memories that augments the big model.
Exactly. And I'll kind of share this in examples of customer, not as the company, because we're also doing this for our company, for our robots AI that we sell to our customers. But as a customer, Gemini 2.5 Pro is super impressive, right? Like that, I recently came out and I've been using it a bunch. Really impressive model, right? And also a really big model. I'd love to have my own Gemini 2.5 Pro. I don't think I have enough, I don't think I have enough GPUs at my place or my office to run one, but I'd love to just run one myself, right? And then I can just do RL on it all day with my own liking, of how it performs. The challenge is that's a little bit of a cost problem that we'll have to solve. Today, there's a whole group of startups and companies that are trying to solve memory and personalization using a big model like Gemini 2.5 Pro. And all the approaches around either RAG, right, where you just store that text and you do RAG on it, or obviously putting the context. But that's okay. I think those approaches are being tried, or like a graph-based search. It just seems to me that it would the humans have online learning. Like as we go around, we learn like in real time as we kind of operate in the world. So one way to try that, obviously, one way to try that is to retrain the Gemini 2.5 Pro as with everyday interactions. Because that's not possible right now, what if you take a smaller model, a really strong small model, and that gets maintained for, let's just take like for myself with my interactions, and then can that work with Gemini 2.5 Pro to be a better AI agent than 2.5 Pro out of the box? And my view is that it can, that we just need to kind of go deeper as a community into this research paradigm.
Cool. Yeah, that reminds me even of AlphaGo, because AlphaGo was a small, strong predictor net with a very large one that was very slow, that the small one prompted essentially. So yeah, that's pretty promising. I almost hesitate to ask this question because I feel like you've talked about so many of them already, but do you have a deeply held belief about artificial intelligence that has changed over this journey for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I have, I have one. It's not that deeply held right now, but I'll kind of pose it because I think it may be good for the listeners to kind of think about this for themselves as well. It's, are we going to be able to get to a white collar worker through the current AI models improving without this AGI having the ability to operate in the physical world? So this is, I would say, the more higher probability belief among the researchers at the leading AI researchers today, which there's a lot of merit to that, which is that, hey, the current approach is working really well. We just keep gathering more and more data on knowledge work tasks, and we do larger training runs, right? And we do more kind of smarter RL for post training, and we'll be able to get there, right? We're making a lot of great progress, and we'll be able to have kind of an average median white collar worker that's going to be available to everyone. But now if we look at today's average median white collar worker human, right? The only intelligence that we know that's been able to perform at that level actually learned in a different way. It kind of learned some base case understanding of the world, because a lot of the knowledge that we intake, we as humans or during pre-training for these models, it's referencing a lot of that about the world, right? That yes, you can kind of read from language, but you can't really fully understand. So this is one of my beliefs that kind of got formed, which is Yeah, we may not be. We I'm not saying we're gonna hit a hard wall, but we're gonna keep getting diminishing returns, right? Like today, the best AI agent at
Mm.
doing, and specifically, I think more on like more agentic, right? Because yes, you can get question answer really well. We already arguably are close to AGI at a question answer approach, but the next part of like long horizon tasks, like hey, go out and do this for me, right? Let's say even in knowledge work, like on a computer screen, I think we may start getting diminishing returns. And I think maybe it kind of building it with this embodied understanding in the beginning will actually help it perform better. So it goes back to what we talked about earlier a bit about
Mm.
these ablation studies done on poetry and coding. I am really curious about kind of that across modality, right? And across environment. Like the ability to
Mm.
just operate in environments helps you understand something that I think will help these models actually perform better across them. Because so that's one of my beliefs that we actually embodied AGI is a prerequisite to AGI. And
Ooh, I like
most
that.
people do not agree with this, but I think I really hope we as a kind of AI community test this out over the next little bit. And if it's needed, more people get excited and work on embodied AGI because then it would not only be helpful to have robots that are helpful to us in the physical world, but it would also be helpful just to solve AGI as a whole.
I like that thesis a lot, actually. So I'm excited to see how that plays out as well. I have one question that I think is on everybody's mind for a podcast like this, which is, Adeel, are you an AI?
Yeah, that's actually a really timely question because this could have all been a VO2 video, Daniel, that you made and shared with your listeners. No, but I know I can actually. I guess here's a cool kind of follow up to that question. How do we prove that? Imagine that this was a couple years from now, and I decided I was busy and I couldn't visit the podcast, right? And I just sent something that was like kind of creating this video. What would you do? I guess as the podcast host to be able to be like, hey, I don't want to be doing this podcast with an AI. I guess, yeah, what would you try to?
That's a great question. I feel like I have maybe an advantage because I've known you for
Yeah.
a while outside of the podcast. But then I feel like the standard time travel thing, it's like, tell me our earliest memory together or something like that. And maybe it wouldn't be in the model. And I feel like that's not necessarily going to work for every situation and every person. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference. I
Yeah.
agree.
What do you think about? I mean, I've been thinking about this. We talked a lot about like kind of capabilities and so forth, but kind of like societal, I guess, implications. One of the things is what does like how does like media like social media and intaking social media change with the human created content and the AI created content getting similar? I noticed so TikTok launched this feature where they tag like AI content, so that's good. And if you upload a video that has AI in it that doesn't have the AI content tag, they will delist the video. The issue is arguably if the AI as the AI keeps getting better, TikTok's whatever algorithm TikTok's using will not be able to determine that. So yeah, I'm like, how does that? I'm curious, like, how do you think that happens out? Is it just that's just the world we live in, and we start to really embellish like in-person conversations more, or because yeah, it feels like we're gonna be close there where we won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's already dangers. Like I've seen people posting videos of news anchors that are 100% fake. And they say these ridiculous things. And then one of them was like, by the way, this is totally fake. And you probably can't tell. And I think you still can, but I think there is a world where maybe you can't tell that it's fake quickly, especially on a TikTok where you're consuming a bunch of things. And I hope that leads people to be a little bit more discerning, a little bit more careful with what they look into and what they believe. Don't think that's going to be true for a lot of people who are quickly consuming content. And I think you're right. It's an arms race, essentially, where the anti-AI detector gets better and then the AI gets better and it has to adjust. I don't know if that's going to keep up either. So I feel like I'm already tired of ChatGPT writing. I
Oh
see
yeah.
so many people who I'm like, that's not your writing. I've got bullet point fatigue. I've got this punchy style of writing fatigue. And I've stopped using AI for a lot of things because it's obvious. And it almost feels like there's two different streams of content that are separating. And it's like, this is very raw. This is maybe authentic is a word people like to use. And this is polished and AI. So I hope there's a taste factor to it where I say, I don't want the AI content. There's too much of it. It's hard to consume because it's too punchy. I just want that natural, maybe not necessarily in person, but like with a human interaction. And I feel like I can tell. I'm hoping that can.
So actually that's kind of the interesting thing. I really, a lot of people talk what should we work on now or what should we study because with the proliferation of AI, what's going to be more important in the future. And one of my views definitely is what you kind of touched on at the end there, which is, things that have the human touch are going to get much more and more valuable. I was actually thinking this is kind of the extreme case of this, but wrinkles and pimples may become more valuable because it's crazy. If you look at all the VO2 videos, right? Like one of the perfect ways to figure out it's everybody looks kind of perfect, right? Like the way AI creates videos. So and you take that to definitely on the writing case, and it's going to be really interesting. I think imperfections are going to, like, the human touch is going to become more valuable. And then for myself, like I love reading. It's like probably one of the, I guess, greatest gifts. Like a lot of I kind of read incessantly, and one thing I have noticed now is a lot of great blog posts, or I'm like kind of reading something, let's say like in economics or tech or so forth or research. People are even in fields like robotics, people are doing full on like huge AI powered like AI written blog posts. And it's just bad because so the irony of it all is, what I do now to be able to save time is because often AI is more verbose, is I take it and put it into AI to summarize. But now we're in a loop as humanity because somebody is using AI to write like long format content that they could have just made shorter, but the AI helped them make it longer. And then others are using it back to summarize. So yeah.
Yes, I find it's just frustrating on the internet. I open a link and this is clearly AI generated. I could have asked ChatGPT and got the same thing. Instead, you made me read your long format web page. Doesn't make any sense. Is there, since we're at time here, I think, is there anything else that you'd like to share that you're working on, or how we can connect with you or follow you?
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm Adeel Zaman _ on X and on Instagram. And yeah, just I would love to kind of hear from anyone who's excited about robotics and embodied AGI. Some of the items that we talked about. I'm excited to share more updates on what I'm working on over the next few months. We've been working super hard on getting our machines and our AI model ready, but truly believe in this concept of AI that you can constantly teach and improve, and it helps you kind of do a lot of tasks. Yeah, and then Daniel, thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. I feel like we can talk for hours on this topic, but it's been fun.
I made this podcast because I want to be the person at the city gate to talk to every person coming in and out doing great things with AI and find out what and why, and then share the learnings with everyone else. It would mean a lot if you could share the episode with someone that you think would like it. And if you know someone who would be a great person for me to talk to, let me know. Please reach out to me at Daniel Maneri on LinkedIn, or shoot an email to daniel@maneri.house, which is Daniel@MANARY.HAUS. Thanks for listening.